me.
Scanning for audio.
Welcome to a Tin Dog podcast, this time talking about Orphan 55, which is the third in the 2020 series of Doctor Who. Or, as it's known in my head, a Pertwee six-parter crammed into 50 minutes. Oh, I'm not being very generous with this story. I suppose it just didn't really speak to me, because Doctor Who had already spoken to me. Now, first off, there won't be any comments from Verity on this one, mainly because of the monsters. I thought it was best just not really quite to have that dodgy creature, regardless of my thoughts, which I'll get back to in a moment, appearing just before bedtime. So bear with me on that one. I do apologise. I'm just a ridiculous parent, really. So, why do I say it's a six-parter from Pertwee times? Well, Doctor Who was at its most political, for me, during the Pertwee era. Yes, there's been flashes of it since. And things like the Green Death and Frontier in Space and that kind of thing. There's even mentions of the state of the Earth. And of course, metaphor's been a big thing with Doctor Who in the past as well. But there's always been a kind of a look after the planet and it'll look after you kind of themes. Oh, there's a golden age, yes, the planet's in a mess, let's go somewhere else kind of thing. These have been recurring themes, and that is the main recurring theme here. And with Pertwee stories, you had locations set here, then there, then another one. And of course, with the second Doctor stories, you had Base Under Siege, which is what this is as well, except they keep changing location because it's more of a Pertwee story, and so on. It's kind of, well, arguably, a love song to traditional old-fashioned Doctor Who. So why is it not appealing to us old-school Doctor Who fans? Because looking at it just from a recipe point of view, it should be ticking all the boxes of things we love, and yet it doesn't seem to have gone down half as well as it should have. I am interested in this. Really, it's a bit concerning and a bit weird. Yes, there are things like nods to the past, like, oh, it's Marb Arch, it's an ancient underground station in an ancient scorched earth that's been moved with a fireball. Oh no, we did it ourselves. Oh, but it's still an underground station, and why isn't the TARDIS translating? Oh, it isn't translating because it's not actually there, and so on. There's lots of nods like that. I didn't like the monsters. Again, I'll come back to that again in a moment, because I'm kind of all over the place with this, because on paper I should like it. On paper this should be a fantastic story. Perhaps it's because the pacing needs to expand more. The characterization needs time to breathe. Oh look, here's an incompetent engineer. Oh, here's the incompetent engineer's son. Right, you go and stand in the corner, we'll get back to you in a minute. Here's the annoyed terrorist. Now you go and stand over there now. Here's the person who's in it just for the money. Oh, it's a bit like Aliens. Oh, but they're not really. But they're in it for their kids. But they didn't tell the kids that's why they're doing it. And so on. You go and stand over there. You line up. All right. Okay, the shield's going down. You go and sort that out. And there's a spa. There's a hotel. Yeah. It's like lots of people trying to tell loads of stories at once. And they're just shouting out words. And you're trying to write down as much as you can. Perhaps an over-egged pudding, isn't it? Perhaps the frenetic scale and speed that storytelling's happening is what we're supposed to get used to these days. Some people would go, oh, it's a bit slow. Well, you can never say that about this programme at all. One of the things that people are saying that they didn't like about this story was the preachy nature at the end. For example, Doctor, can we go back and save Kane and her daughter? We have got a time machine after all. Well, no, I'm going to have to talk to you about recycling instead, in the same way that He-Man used to talk to us all at the end. You see, we've heard the messages before. We are the choir. But Doctor Who's primary audience, as I've said so many times, isn't us. It's the kids. These kids haven't seen the 50-year-old episodes with John Pertwee talking about giant maggots and polluting the atmosphere and the world being made of clinker. They've not seen those old VHSs and DVDs and Blu-rays and all of that nonsense. They haven't gone back and streamed a service that doesn't actually exist, or at least it does on BritBox, but let's not go there. They haven't accidentally come across these stories. This is a story about now being told to the audience of now, to the children of now, and they're going, yeah, we agree, in the same way that we watched The Green Death and went, yeah, we agree, we're with you. Because this is obviously the climate emergency. Now, during that flashy flashback sequence when the Doctor made contact with their mind, I'm sure there was an atomic explosion at some point, but perhaps not. Perhaps it was just me thinking these things. So, issues with the story? Well, my main issue is with the dregs. They're sold as an apex predator. Now, issues with that description. One, what are they being predators on? There's nothing else left in the ecosystem. And they wouldn't have evolved to be that. The idea of us evolving into creatures that breathe out oxygen, they're designed. They've been created. They're not just an angry tree. They'll have been created. Now, if there was a throwaway remark about them being designed for war or designed to help part of terraforming or something like that, that would have made sense. Because you send these creatures in, or you have them around, or they were left over from an earlier conflict in order to try and save the planet at the end, or cleanse the whole thing and it just got out of hand. That would have made more sense. Issue 1. Apex predators are predators of something else. There's nothing else alive. You don't see anything. There's meant to be scorching radioactive sun coming over the horizon, and there's a lot of CO2, which would mean that the trees can survive, although they do need a bit of oxygen. And yet you do see trees. Now, there's also fires burning, which need less oxygen, but they're burning green because there's a different gas in the air, which means there's something else burning. I'm not going to describe what the ecosystem of the future is going to be like, but that's just one of those little niggles. Apex predators are also gorgeous. The dregs can't even close their mouth. They sleep standing up to make it more scary, but they also sleep standing up because the costume's so tight they can't sit down. Thousands of them coming over the hills is a bit Zulu, but we'll leave that one there. Because it's base under siege. That's what it starts as, that's what it goes through and comes back to. It's so many ideas just coming at you one after another. And then they all climb down a big shaft and end up in the big tunnel they used for a rifle range in Torchwood. I like these locations. It looked lovely. It also looked really cold. When Graham's standing there going, I'm going to go over here and sit there, then I'm going to sit over there, then I'm going to get myself a cocktail. That is perfectly reasonable and great line. And deserves to be a ribbon at Gallifrey. But it's still, well, just a bit pants. Because it looked so cold. It didn't look like a vacation spot. The elderly couple, well, it did feel a bit Paradise Towers, but again, we're back to the whole love song to old Doctor Who, and perhaps that's how we should look on this story. That's what it is. It's a story written for us. And we weren't grateful. We didn't appreciate it for that. We just went, oh, yeah, fair enough. Now, little things occurred to me, like, and this is going to make me sound awful, but one of the characters sort of said something at the beginning in a Scottish accent, and I missed it. So I rewound the episode and then put the subtitles on. It was at that point that I noticed that hyphen with a 3 was actually written on the subtitles as hyphen with a 3, which I thought was a lovely, lovely point. People who are doing these things actually care. It's nice. However, the costume for hyphen with a 3, well, that belonged in 1987, possibly standing next to Ken Dodd. So even then, that is a love song to the past. So if you enjoyed this story, why don't you go back and watch every single classic Doctor Who story going? You'll love it and join us. But if you didn't enjoy this, well, you're probably an old school fan and a little bit long in the tooth for this sort of thing, and you should just get on with it. The business with the virus, well, that made sense for later on. And of course, it was nice to see the bloke from the In-Betweeners, and it was really nice to see the little kid who, I almost gave you a spoiler there, from Dark Materials, all wearing weird wigs. Oh, it was like they were attending a UFO convention. And that was fine, they were all lovely moments. But it just made me feel while I was watching it that this is the reason that I love Big Finish audio Doctor Who so much more than on TV. Tiny moments that made me smile, like the creature, the dragging its nails across the CGI, tank, and it making screeching noises, but the nails were clearly just bending. They made me smile. The kill me now just was like Revelation of the Daleks. Again, nods to the past. So perhaps we should just let this episode go. It did feel like an omnibus edition that had been edited just a tiny bit too much. And those edits were all covered with big screaming monsters being repeated in that way that Buck Rogers used to do it. Yes, it felt like pitch black, but you know what, so do lots of things. And that business with the randomised laser fire, again, makes me think that the creatures were all, genetically modified for war and left over from us, and they weren't us descended. But either way, talking about it won't save the planet. So stop listening to this podcast and go and recycle something. Anything. As long as it's not all Doctor Who. So until next time, when we're probably talking about Tesla. Oh, the steampunk in me. Be seeing you. That was the Doctor Who Tin Dog Podcast, available on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, RSS, Vimeo, and across the internet. Doctor Who and its associated properties are all copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Why not become a supporter by visiting patreon.com/tindog. Contact the show on tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.
Benny, 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 here's Benny. Benny, Benny, Benny.